When Rachel's parents refused to care for her children while she lay in a hospital bed, they assumed she would accept it. They assumed she would keep paying their bills, keep seeking their love, keep being their personal ATM. But what they didn't realize was that this time, she had reached her breaking point. And when Rachel Carter reaches her breaking point, the whole world is about to change. Rachel Carter gripped her phone tightly, her fingers trembling as her mother's voice hissed through the speaker. "Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again. We have Elton John tickets, Rachel. Do you even realize how hard it was to get those seats?" Her heart pounded in her chest. She pressed a hand against her bandaged abdomen, the fresh pain from her emergency surgery radiating through her body. "Mom, please. I have no one else. Just for one night. I just had surgery. I need help." "We're retired, Rachel." Her father's deep, dismissive voice cut in. "We've raised our kids. We're not doing this again. You've always been so difficult. You should have planned better." Her breath caught in her throat. Planned better? She hadn't planned for a ruptured internal organ. She hadn't planned for a medical emergency that nearly killed her. And she certainly hadn't planned for the people who should have been there, the people she had supported financially for years, to turn their backs on her when she needed them most. Her 2-year-old twins, Ava and Noah, sat quietly in the hospital room, stacking plastic building blocks in the corner. Noah clutched his favorite stuffed lion, his tiny brows furrowing as he concentrated. They didn't understand what was happening. They didn't know that their grandparents, people they had barely seen more than a handful of times, had just abandoned them too. Rachel swallowed the lump in her throat. "Dad, Mom, I've been helping you for years. I send you money every month." Her father snorted. "And we appreciate it. But that doesn't mean we owe you babysitting services." Her mother sighed dramatically. "Rachel, you always act like a victim. We deserve to enjoy our lives. You made your choices. You had kids. That's your responsibility." Her vision blurred. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. Her parents had lied to her for years. They had played the loving, supportive family when they needed money. But now, when she was at her weakest, they treated her like a burden. A warm hand gently touched her shoulder. Rachel turned, blinking back tears, as Grace, the night nurse, offered a sympathetic look. "You don't have to beg them." Rachel swallowed hard. But what choice did she have? "My best friend Olivia is a nanny," Grace continued. "She specializes in kids who've been through tough situations. Let me call her for you." Rachel hesitated. For years, she had told herself that family was family, no matter what. That if she just tried harder, gave more, maybe one day her parents would finally see her. Finally love her the way they loved Emma, her younger sister. But they never would. She had been nothing more than a paycheck to them. Her parents weren't struggling financially. She knew that now. They had a comfortable retirement, spent money on concerts, vacations, and luxury items. Yet, month after month, she had sent them $2,500 out of guilt, believing that families should support each other. But where was their support for her? She clenched her jaw. "Call the nanny." Grace nodded, stepping out of the room. Rachel picked up her phone. One tap, banking app open. One swipe, cancel all automatic transfers. One message, to her parents. "I will no longer be providing financial support. My children and I deserve better. Do not contact me again." Her thumb hovered for just a second. Then she hit send. A strange thing happened the moment she did. For the first time in years, she could breathe. No guilt, no obligation, no desperate need for approval. Her parents might not realize it yet, but she had just set herself free. And when they did, the real war would begin. As the hospital lights flickered softly above her, a wave of exhaustion hit Rachel all at once. Her body was weak, her stitches throbbed, and the weight of everything, the betrayal, the years of sacrifice, threatened to crush her. But there was something else now. A fire. A small, flickering ember of something she hadn't felt in years. Self-respect. She glanced at Ava and Noah, who had fallen asleep on a blanket on the hospital floor, their tiny hands curled into soft fists. They were all that mattered now. Grace returned moments later, her expression relieved. Olivia is on her way. She'll be here in less than an hour. You can rest now, Rachel. You're not alone in this. Rachel exhaled slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. But this time, it wasn't out of pain. It was something else entirely. Freedom. She closed her eyes and let herself drift into sleep, knowing that when she woke up, everything would be different. And for the first time in a long, long time, she wasn't afraid of that. Rachel woke to the soft beeping of the heart monitor and the rhythmic hum of the Ford drip. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the dull ache in her abdomen pulled her back to reality. The hospital, the surgery, the betrayal. Her parents had made their choice, and so had she. They were nothing to her now. No longer her responsibility. No longer her burden. Ava and Noah were still sleeping soundly on the small hospital couch, their tiny bodies curled beneath a thin blanket. Rachel watched their peaceful faces, feeling an overwhelming wave of love and determination. She had spent years bending over backward for people who never truly cared, but that ended today. From now on, every ounce of her energy, every decision would be for these two. A quiet knock at the door broke her thoughts. Grace peeked in, smiling softly before stepping aside to reveal another woman. Olivia, the nanny. She had shoulder-length auburn hair, warm brown eyes, and an air of calm authority. She didn't hesitate, walking straight to the couch where the twins lay. She knelt beside them, her voice gentle but confident. "They're beautiful," Olivia said, "and they'll be okay. You will too." Rachel wanted to believe her. She really did. Before they could speak further, her phone vibrated on the bedside table. She didn't have to look to know who it was. Her mother. The first call of many, she was sure. She let it ring until it stopped. Seconds later, it buzzed again. Another call, then a third, then a text. "You're being ridiculous, Rachel. Fix this now." She deleted the message. Another one popped up immediately. "You can't just cut us off. We have bills to pay." And there it was. No questions about her surgery. No concern for the twins. Just their panic over money. Rachel turned off her phone. She wasn't going to let them take another moment of her energy. Before continuing the story, I want to connect with all of you, my incredible viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop the flag of your country in the comments below. I love seeing how far this community reaches. Now, let's get back to Rachel because things are about to get even more intense. By the time she was discharged 2 days later, Olivia had seamlessly taken over. She moved in and made the transition effortless, setting up a routine for the twins while Rachel focused on recovery. But just because she had cut off her parents didn't mean they had given up. It started with texts, then voicemails. "Rachel, this is absurd. We need to talk. We're your parents. You can't do this to us. This is getting out of hand. Call us back before things get worse." Each message was more desperate than the last. Then, 3 days after Rachel arrived home, her sister Emma called. "You need to fix this." Emma's voice was sharp with frustration. "Mom and Dad are freaking out. They said you cut them off out of nowhere." Rachel scoffed. "Out of nowhere? I begged them for help, Emma. I was lying in a hospital bed, barely able to move, and they refused because they had concert tickets." Emma hesitated. "They told me it was just a minor procedure." Rachel felt a slow burn of anger creep up her spine. "They lied to you. I almost died, Emma." The silence on the other end of the phone was heavy. When Emma finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "They wouldn't do that." "They did." Rachel took a deep breath. "And while you're at it, ask them why they need my money so badly. Because last time I checked, they had no problem buying luxury vacations, concert tickets, and a brand new car last year." Emma didn't reply, but Rachel knew that seed of doubt had been planted. By the end of the week, things escalated. Her parents weren't just calling, now they were showing up. The first time, Rachel ignored the knocking, watching from the window as her mother ranted and paced in the front yard. Her father's arms crossed as he stared at the house like she was holding them hostage. The second time, they brought reinforcements. Rachel opened the door just a crack, enough to see her mother, her father, and standing behind them, Aunt Linda, the family peacemaker. "Rachel, honey, Linda began, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Let's be reasonable. Your parents are struggling. They said you cut them off without warning. Rachel's grip tightened on the doorframe. Did they also tell you why? Did they mention how they refused to help me after my emergency surgery? Or how they've been using my money for luxuries while pretending they're broke? Her mother's face flushed. Rachel, that's not fair. Rachel narrowed her eyes. Neither is abandoning your daughter in a hospital bed. Her father sighed, stepping forward. Look, we may have made a mistake, but we're still family. We need to figure this out. No, you need to figure this out, Rachel shot back. You're both fully capable adults. Figure out your own finances. I'm done. Her mother's face twisted in anger. So you're just going to let us lose everything? Rachel tilted her head. Maybe you should have thought about that before you chose Elton John over your own daughter. She shut the door in their faces. For a while, things were quiet. Too quiet. Then Emma called again. But this time, her voice was different. There was no anger, only confusion. Rachel, I found something. Rachel sat up straighter. What? I was at Mom and Dad's today, and I saw bank statements on the kitchen table. They took out a second mortgage last year. A huge one. Rachel frowned. For what? Emma hesitated. A yacht. Rachel laughed, but there was no humor in it. A yacht. Emma's voice was tight. I don't think they ever planned to pay it back. They just assumed you would keep covering their expenses. Everything clicked into place. Her parents had never been struggling. They had been living off her money, comfortably, extravagantly, without a care in the world. And the moment she cut them off, the empire they had built off her back started to crumble. Rachel exhaled, feeling a sense of clarity she hadn't had in years. Let them drown in their own mess. Emma's voice was small. They don't have anyone else, Rachel. Rachel's answer was immediate. That's not my problem. Because for the first time, it really wasn't. Rachel knew the storm wasn't over. Cutting her parents off had been the first step. But people like them didn't just disappear quietly. They were too entitled, too arrogant to accept that their golden fountain had run dry. It was only a matter of time before they came back, demanding, manipulating, twisting reality to suit their needs. And she was right. 3 weeks had passed since she had sent that final message. 3 weeks of silence. 3 weeks of waiting. Then, on a cold Saturday morning, the pounding on her front door shattered the illusion of peace. She knew it was them before she even looked. When she opened the door, her mother was standing there in a designer coat, arms crossed over her chest, eyes blazing with fury. Her father stood behind her, his face a mask of barely contained rage. And this time they weren't alone. Standing beside them, arms folded and expression unreadable, was a man in a gray suit. Rachel's stomach twisted. A lawyer. We need to talk, her mother said, her voice clipped and sharp. Rachel kept her face impassive. There's nothing to talk about, her father scoffed. This childish behavior has gone on long enough. You've made your point. Now it's time to fix this. Rachel tilted her head. Fix what? My life is going just fine without you. Her mother's lips thinned. Enough. We're here to tell you that we've spoken to an attorney about our rights. You cannot legally keep us from our grandchildren. If you don't reconsider, we will take this to court. Rachel blinked, then let out a short laugh. You're joking. The lawyer cleared his throat. Your parents have a case under grandparents' rights statutes. If this goes to court, a judge may grant them visitation. Rachel's blood ran cold. This was lower than even she expected from them. You mean to tell me that after abandoning me in the hospital, refusing to watch my kids when I was fighting for my life, you now want legal access to them? Her mother lifted her chin. We won't let you turn them against us. Rachel took a deep breath, gripping the doorframe so tightly her knuckles turned white. You have no relationship with them. They don't even know who you are. Her father stepped forward. That's your fault. Rachel shook her head in disbelief. No, that's yours. You made sure of it the moment you chose a concert over their well-being. You don't get to ignore them for years, and then demand a place in their lives when it's convenient for you. The lawyer adjusted his tie. If this goes to court, you'll be required to defend why cutting off access is in the children's best interest. Judges don't look kindly on parents who deny family connections without reason. Rachel felt the heat rise in her chest. Oh, I have plenty of reasons. She turned on her heel, disappearing into the house and returning moments later with a stack of papers. She shoved them toward the lawyer. Here, my bank records. Every single payment I've sent them for the last 3 years. And right there, she flipped to another page, is proof of their latest luxury purchase. A yacht, paid for with the money they guilt me into giving them. Her mother's face paled. That is none of your concern. Rachel ignored her and flipped another page. And this is proof that they refused to help me during a medical emergency. I have hospital records, text messages, and even witness statements from the hospital staff who saw me begging for their help. The lawyer took the papers, scanning them quickly. His brows furrowed. Rachel leaned in, voice steady as steel. So go ahead, take me to court. But be prepared, because I have no problem standing before a judge and laying out exactly why these two shouldn't be anywhere near my children. A tense silence filled the air. Her mother's hands trembled at her sides. Her father clenched his jaw. The lawyer exhaled, flipping through the pages once more before turning to them. This complicates things. Rachel folded her arms. I suggest you rethink this little stunt, because if you try to force your way into my life again, I won't just defend myself. I'll destroy every shred of credibility you have left. Her father's nostrils flared. You're making a big mistake. Rachel smirked. No, the mistake was assuming I would ever let you manipulate me again. Her mother opened her mouth as if to argue, but something in Rachel's expression must have finally sunk in. The realization that their daughter was no longer under their control, that the strings they had used to puppeteer her life had been cut for good. Rachel took a slow, deliberate step forward, lowering her voice to a whisper. Get off my property. For the first time in her life, her parents didn't argue. Her mother turned sharply, her heels clicking against the pavement as she stormed back toward their car. Her father followed, stiff with anger. The lawyer hesitated, giving Rachel one last glance before shaking his head and tucking the documents into his briefcase. Rachel watched them drive away, exhaling a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She turned back toward the house, closing the door behind her. Olivia stood in the hallway, arms crossed, watching carefully. That was intense. Rachel let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. Yeah, but it's over. Olivia raised a brow. Is it? Rachel hesitated. She wanted to believe that was the end of it, that her parents would finally accept defeat. But people like them never went down without a fight, and she had a feeling this wasn't over yet. Rachel sat in her living room, the weight of the last few weeks pressing against her chest like an unseen force. The confrontation with her parents had ended, but the echoes of their threats still lingered in her mind. She had expected retaliation, expected them to lash out in one final desperate attempt to regain control. But instead, there had been nothing, just silence. At first, she was cautious, waiting for another knock on her door, another legal letter, another wave of manipulation disguised as concern. But as the days stretched into weeks, it became clear. Her parents had finally accepted defeat, or, at the very least, had no more moves left to play. It was strange, the absence of their presence in her life. For years, she had lived under the crushing weight of obligation, conditioned to believe that her worth was tied to what she could give. Without them constantly draining her energy, without their voices whispering guilt into her ear, she felt something she hadn't in a long, long time. Peace. With her newfound clarity, Rachel poured herself into her work and her children. The extra money she once sent to her parents was now going toward Ava and Noah's future. Quality daycare, a college fund, a new home in a safer neighborhood. She even invested in therapy for herself, determined to break the cycle of emotional manipulation that had ruled her life for too long. One afternoon, as she was folding laundry, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. She expected it to be Olivia or maybe Emma, but when she looked at the screen, her fingers froze. It was her mother. Rachel's heart pounded as she stared at the name, debating whether to answer. Against her better judgment, she pressed accept and lifted the phone to her ear. There was a long pause before her mother spoke, and when she did, her voice was softer than Rachel had ever heard. I just wanted to say, we're selling the house. Rachel blinked. What? We can't afford to keep it, her mother admitted. Your father, he's not handling it well. He keeps blaming you, but I think he's starting to realize that we did this to ourselves. A part of Rachel felt a small flicker of sympathy. But then she remembered the hospital, the way they dismissed her pain, the way they left her to struggle alone. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice steady. Another pause. Nothing, her mother whispered. I wanted you to know that I regret how we treated you. I see it now. Rachel inhaled slowly, the words sinking in. She had dreamed of this moment for years, fantasized about hearing an apology, about finally being acknowledged. And yet, now that it was here, it didn't feel the way she had imagined. Because it didn't change anything. She was still the woman they had abandoned. Still the mother who had to fight for her children alone. And no amount of regret could erase the years of pain they had inflicted on her. I appreciate you saying that, Rachel finally said, choosing her words carefully. But I've moved on. I know. Her mother's voice wavered. And I hope someday, maybe we can talk again. Rachel didn't answer. She didn't know if she wanted that. Maybe one day, maybe never. But for the first time in her life, she realized something important. She had the power now. The choice was hers. And that was enough. She hung up the phone and let out a slow breath, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't waiting for validation or love that would never come. She had everything she needed, and it had never come from them. That night, as she tucked Ava and Noah into bed, Noah looked up at her sleepily and whispered, "Love you, Mama." Rachel smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "I love you too, baby." And just like that, she knew. She had won. This story is a powerful reminder that sometimes, the hardest thing you'll ever do is walk away from people who refuse to love you the way you deserve. But in doing so, you create space for something better. Peace, happiness, and the freedom to live life on your own terms. Now, I want to hear from all of you. What do you think about Rachel's journey? If you liked the story, comment 2 below. If you didn't, comment 7. I'm always open to hearing different perspectives. And if you believe in standing up for yourself, taking control of your life, and protecting your peace, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Mr.HeartVibes so you never miss another powerful story. Your support means the world to me. See you in the next one.